And tonight on the Daily Wrap, new shocking details on the now former House Speaker Denny Hastert indictment. Could he be part of a larger crime? A controversial provision of the Patriot Act is set to expire at 12:01 Monday morning. Will Rand Paul filibuster the House again? Another Draw Muhammad cartoon contest kicks off tonight in Phoenix, where visitors have been told to arrive armed. And what was Marco Rubio doing in Las Vegas with a cast member from Pawn Stars? We've got all that, plus potluck and yay and nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show. I'm Joe Concha. Joining me tonight is SiriusXM radio host, senior political columnist for Forbes, and my co-host.
You know, we can do a whole show just doing my credits.
Yes.
Should we do all of them? What do you think?
Former judge.
No, we don't have to go back. Just present. And I can sit next to John Fund, so you know.
He has quite a LinkedIn page, no question, Mr. Unger does. To his right, Newsmax TV contributor and writer for National Review Online, that is John Fund, and former Navy SEAL, former FBI Special Agent, and president of Continued Services LLC, Jonathan Gilliam, joins us once again.
And you can add Sirius radio host to that as well.
And a Sirius radio host as well. Right. Who has the bigger resume now, Unger?
You know, we let Gilliam in.
Nice. It's time for the Daily Download. And we begin tonight with explosive new details about why former House Speaker Denny Hastert has been indicted for allegedly evading federal bank laws. Sources tell the Los Angeles Times that Hastert agreed to pay $3.5 million in hush money to a man in which he had a sexual relationship with back when Hastert was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach. Hastert, the longest-serving Republican Speaker of the House, has not responded to requests for comment. Prosecutors say Hastert had structured the withdrawal of cash to evade the requirement that banks report cash transactions over $10,000. He's accused of lying to the FBI about the withdrawals. So, this indictment obviously sent shockwaves, Mr. Unger. Are you surprised, given that he never was a guy known to have a bad reputation? You may disagree with him politically, but this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, you're always surprised when something like this happens. And by the way, I want to make sure credit goes where it's due. It was actually a couple writers at the Chicago Tribune who originally spoke to a federal officer and got the information, and all the papers have gone with it since. Look, you know, what's going to be fascinating about this, or what's fascinating to me, it's somewhat unusual to see charges like this in what's basically an extortion case, the way we're being told, and not see the other side of it. So my question, in other words, whoever extorted him.
Individual A.
Yeah, also Individual A also broke the law, if these allegations are correct. So I'm kind of wondering at this point that the whole Individual A thing could be the result of whoever that individual is having already pled, acknowledged it, and we're not being told that, and made an agreement that he wouldn't be named at this point.
Wow.
So it may well be that we've got somebody else involved here who's already given up.
Yeah, John, I was about to say that obviously this is clearly blackmail. The payments weren't made, as far as we could tell, while he was Speaker of the House.
No.
It was done afterwards. Quite frankly, as Speaker, he probably couldn't afford these kind of payments.
That's what becoming a lobbyist allows you to do.
Right.
Pay $3.5 million in hush money. It's true that this fellow, who apparently alleges abuse 30-odd years ago, it's true that he probably went to federal authorities and probably got immunity. But for the taxes, I mean, if this guy is getting $50,000 in cash every 6 weeks. No, I understand. But I want to know, immunity, yes, maybe for the extortion. I think this fellow should still suffer tax consequences.
You mean him?
Every $50,000 every 6 weeks?
Right.
I doubt that he reported that.
That's true. I see what you're saying. By the way, great irony here. The law that Denny Hastert is being charged with is the result of Denny Hastert's work in Congress. He pushed through the Patriot Act. This is something that came from the Patriot Act.
This is probably another part of the Patriot Act that should be revisited and adjusted.
Maybe so.
Jonathan, your reaction?
Well, you know, when I read this, I'm just not sure if it, you know, blackmail, if that's just the word that we're using, or if that's the word that the authorities are using, because there's a difference between blackmail or extortion and a payoff. Now that's Well, blackmail is where he's actually a crime is actually being committed against him, saying if you don't pay me this money, I'm going to start talking. Whereas a payoff would have been where he decided, I don't want this out, so I'm going to pay this guy to be quiet.
Sounds like a distinction without a difference.
Well, and it gets even
Well,
crazier
one's a
when
crime.
you put.
One's a crime for one guy,
Maybe.
one's a crime for the other.
You can be sure this is what he argues. He argues, well, this was just a settlement because I was going to sue him. However, it won't work. It is extortion. If you get to its most technical, meaning it's extortion because of the elements of that, and there's no way it's not a crime.
This is the only thing I can wrap my mind around, the fact that this other person would be given any immunity, is if the thought of paying him off came from Hastert and not from the guy saying, you will pay me or else.
What's the likelihood of that?
Well, if he didn't want his career to be ruined for some
what
whatever
career?
reason.
And by the way, why would it be ruined if the guy wasn't saying he wasn't going to talk?
I mean, look, people
clearly.
do all kinds, not just career, but personal reasons.
Yeah.
You know, there may be.
But if the guy didn't
so-
come to him and say either pay up or I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
this,
Even
why
if-
would he have volunteered
if it was
the
a,
money?
If it was a payoff, though, and he was the
I
way he
think-
withdrew the money, that's going to.
I think it's fair to say we're going to learn more about this because this is a man who's 73 years old. He's made a bunch of money in lobbying. He's basically winding down his career. And a guy comes forward, if he says, I'm going to expose you, well, I doubt that there's proof after 30-odd years. So the question, there's probably something here we just don't know.
There's also likely no prosecution after 30-something
No,
years.
definitely no prosecution.
And it's fascinating. It's terrible that we have to get our kicks hearing these kinds of stories. And listen, I mean, he may have been a Republican speaker, but I always thought Hastert was a pretty good guy. You know, level-headed.
Once again, though, if you're from Illinois and you're elected, boy,
You end
do
up in
see-
jail.
You seem to be in legal trouble.
You're
no matter
right
what
about the
party.
proof part, though, because 30 years ago, there couldn't be any cell phone pictures. There weren't any texts, right? No emails.
Could have
So
been his word against the other.
yeah, you basically got a cannon. Maybe you had to like hide a cannon. So you know.
I'd
a
also
he
like
said,
to
she
find out
said,
the
or he
age
said,
of
he
that
said.
guy and when this actually happened. I think that's going to play a big part from a legal standpoint as well.
I can see that. Well, let's move on to another big story from the nation's capital, the impending expiration of a controversial provision in the Patriot Act. Senators returned from recess for a rare Sunday session to vote on whether to extend the NSA's program to collect bulk phone data. That provision expires at 12:01 Monday morning. And late this afternoon, President Obama urged the Senate to vote on a bipartisan bill approved in the House.
I don't want us to be in a situation in which, for a certain period of time, those authorities go away and suddenly we're dark, and heaven forbid we've got a problem where we could have prevented a terrorist attack or apprehended someone who was engaged in dangerous activity, but we didn't do so simply because of inaction in the Senate.
Now, the House passed the Freedom Act, which ends the NSA's bulk collection of telephone call records and replaces it with a more targeted system for retrieving the information. Is the future of the NSA program hinging on what Rand Paul is going to do, Rick Unger?
No, I mean, Rand Paul has a few things left in his bag of tricks that he could do. It would only delay things until Thursday, so that's the worst of it. Look, you know, I think there's going to be trouble on Sunday. I think it will expire. Even, by the way, if they do anything other than agree to what the House has already passed, it goes past the deadline because the House has to come back on Monday and agree to whatever the Senate comes up with. So anything short of that.
The original author of the Patriot Act in the House, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, who was chairman of the Judiciary Committee, says the NSA never should have been allowed to do these things. It was not part of congressional intent. He wants the program wound down. He says it's rife with abuse. Parts of the Patriot Act were written to have a sunset provision. The sunset provision means we take another look at them and see if it's still working. Two things we've learned about the NSA program. They can't point to any single incident that was prevented from the collection of this data.
Right.
And we've seen Mr. Clapper, the head of the intelligence agency, lying to Congress about it. We've seen other things. We've seen lots of things that say this justifies being sunsetted, not extended.
But it's still not going to go away simply because every politician, you make good points, but every politician is going to be afraid, oh my goodness, if I vote to end it and something bad happens that we could have found, oh, this is terrible. So you know what? The right answer is probably what the House came up with. It's not a big deal, but it's something, and I think that's where they'll end up. But I wouldn't mind if they ended it.
Jonathan, last word, 5 seconds. I know it's not a lot to really share on it. but-
Politics instead of results.
Okay. Coming up next, Cuba has been taken off the U.S. terror list. Another Draw Muhammad cartoon. We talk all about that next.